I've wasted real money on backpacking gear, and I've spent real money that paid off on every trip since. After 125 trips of buying this stuff myself, here's how I now decide which is which before I spend. These days, it's hard to open a social media app without seeing a ton of gear companies showing off their flashy, new ultralight gear, promising that this is going to be the thing that finally changes your trips. Sometimes that's true, but most of the time it's just marketing, and it's genuinely hard to tell which is which from a thumbnail. So let's start with where I'd tell you to save your money. First, your stove setup is a good example. You don't need a $200 stove system with the fancy pot and the built-in igniter and the whole matching kit. A small canister stove and a simple pot boils water just fine. That's really the whole job description. Something basic like a Pocket Rocket 2 or a Soto Amicus, along with my personal favorite, the Toaks titanium pot, gives you a bomb-proof cook system at well under $100. And let's talk tents, because tents are one of the big ones that people ask me about. The way I think about it, spending a ton of money on a premium backpacking tent is really more of a luxury choice. What that extra money usually buys you is some more space, maybe some better waterproofing, and often some decent ounces off your base weight. And those are nice things for sure. But you don't need to feel like your tent has to be some super expensive upgrade to have good trips. I've made this mistake myself. I've bought super expensive premium Dyneema shelters because I thought the lighter the shelter, well, the better it must be. Only to eventually realize afterwards that I actually prefer the comfort and usability of a double wall freestanding tent, even though they weigh a bit more. Now, there is one place where it's worth spending more on your shelter. If you've got a super budget, like $50 big box store tent that leaks the second a real storm rolls in, or the poles are so flimsy that you're worried about them snapping in the wind, that's where upgrading to at least a legit backpacking tent will provide you with some real value. Something like the Big Agnes Blacktail, the Nemo Aurora, or the MSR Elixir are good examples of upgrades here, keeping you in about the $300 range. All right, let's talk water filters. This is a category I don't think you need to spend a lot of money on. A basic squeeze filter like the Sawyer Squeeze or the Katadyn Be Free will do the job for most weekend trips. You don't need some elaborate gravity system with 3 bags and a hose kit just to get water into a bottle. That stuff makes sense for certain situations, bigger groups, longer trips where you're filtering a lot of water at once. But for a normal 2 to 3 night trip, it's just more stuff in your pack doing a job that a cheap little filter already handles pretty fine. And camp clothing. I'll throw this in too, okay? Camp comfort matters to me. I like having a warm layer to put on when I get to camp and just sit for a while. And honestly, a basic fleece or a budget synthetic jacket does that job well enough. Where people end up overspending is the premium ultralight puffies, the $400 ones with the fancy fill rating, which I do own and I genuinely love. But what that money is really buying you is weight savings, not warmth. And unless you're genuinely trying to shave ounces off your base weight, you don't need to spend that kind of money just to be warm at camp. Now, here's where I'd spend real money without a second thought. Insulation is the one people mess up the most. Your sleeping bag or quilt and your sleeping pad. This is where people try to save weight or save money, and it often backfires. Because a bad night of sleep from being cold is one of the most miserable things you can experience on a backpacking trip. And it doesn't just ruin that night, it ruins the rest of your trip too, because, well, now you're sleep deprived and having to hike all day the next day carrying 30 plus pounds on your back up mountains. So one of the first places I recommend investing real money is on your sleep system. And if you want to see exactly what that setup looks for me, I've got my full personal gear list linked below. And speaking of pack weight, your backpack is an obvious upgrade target. A pack that fits your back and feels good is maybe the single biggest thing that changes how you experience every single trip you take. It's on your back the entire time you're moving, every mile, every climb. However, a more expensive pack doesn't always mean a more comfortable one. In my opinion, the main spec you want to look for in a backpack is simply how comfortable does it feel on your back once you've loaded it with real weight and spent some time wearing it. So whatever it costs to land on the one that actually fits you, well, spend it. Next up, rain gear. So this one depends a lot on where you hike. If you're in a mild climate like I am here in California, you can get away with a cheaper rain shell. And in fact, I usually hike with like a $20 Frog Togs. But if you're somewhere where you experience real weather during the wet season, a proper rain shell is absolutely a valuable investment. Spending a bit more on better waterproofing and ventilation features like pit zips is gonna keep you drier and a lot more comfortable when you're stuck out in it for hours at a time. And another place where it's worth investing real money is footwear. Similar to the backpack, comfort is king when it comes to shoes or your boots. You don't want to be hiking miles and miles every day in footwear that your feet don't agree with, and blisters are one of the most common setbacks on a backpacking trip. Now, again, that doesn't mean the most comfortable shoes for you are always the most expensive ones. But when I go shopping for hiking shoes, I basically try to ignore the price tag entirely, and I just pick the shoe that feels the best on my feet. And guys, if you haven't already, consider subscribing. I put out backpacking content like this every week. And another gear item that I think is totally worth investing in, and which might not immediately be obvious, is trekking poles. Now, you don't need the $250 ultralight carbon ones, but there's a real difference between a cheap pair from Amazon and a quality pair of poles that you might find at a place like REI. Budget trekking poles can work, but they're just not as durable or reliable as higher quality poles, and they're more prone to failing or snapping if you put real weight on them. One simple upgrade that's really improved my trips was switching to trekking poles that have cork handles instead of rubber ones. These are more comfortable to grip and they wick away sweat. A couple good options here are the Black Diamond Pursuit or the REI Traverse. So a good rule of thumb is to spend your money on what actually touches you out there. Your feet, your hands, your back, what's between you and the ground all night. Save on anything that's mostly just a lighter number or a fancier name. And if you're not sure which one something is, ask yourself if what you already own is actually failing you. Because if it's not, you probably don't need the upgrade yet. And if you want to hear about how I wasted thousands of dollars chasing ultralight gear only to end up regretting it, this next video walks through that whole story. So pay attention to where your money's going, make the upgrades where they actually count, and I'll see ya on the trail.